The quantum disruption field hummed with a low, menacing frequency that most alien species couldn't even perceive. But they could feel its effects. Ambassador Derek Reyes stood perfectly still, his tailored diplomatic suit a stark contrast to the mounting tension in the council chamber. The Galactic Concordance council chambers were a marvel of xeno-architectural design, a massive hemispherical room constructed from adaptive crystal matrices that could change color and texture based on diplomatic moods. Today those crystals flickered uncertainly, sensing the unprecedented tension. Surrounding Reyes were the other human delegates, each a specialist in a different domain. To his left, Dr. Karina Yoshida, quantum communications expert, her fingers subtly tracing a pattern on a nearly invisible neural interface. To his right, Commander Marcus Chen, military strategist, whose eyes constantly scanned the room with a predator's calculation. The alien representatives represented the most powerful species in the known galaxy. The silicon-based Obsidian Collective, their crystalline forms refracting light in impossible geometric patterns. The gaseous Vornak, contained in sophisticated environmental suits that allowed them to interact with solid matter beings. The Trilak diplomatic team, a cluster of sentient tentacular organisms that communicated through complex chromatic shifts and electromagnetic pulses. They had all grown complacent, comfortable, believing that humanity would always be the diplomatic buffer, the mediators, the species that could find compromise where no compromise seemed possible. They were wrong. Proposed Resolution 7129 Gamma seeks to implement additional restrictive measures on human colonial expansion, droned the Obsidian Collective's primary representative, its crystalline form shifting through shades of bureaucratic gray. The ecological impact of unrestricted human settlement continues to be a concern for galactic stability. Ecological impact. The phrase was a thinly veiled threat. What they really meant was, we're afraid of how quickly humans adapt, grow, and transform. Reyes had heard this argument 1,000 times. Humanity had been patient, diplomatic, cooperative. But patience has its limits. His neural interface, carefully concealed beneath his skin, began to pulse. A silent countdown. A signal to the teams waiting both in this chamber and across hundreds of human-established systems. Before we address Resolution 7129 Gamma, Reyes began, his voice calm and measured. The human delegation would like to present some information. With a gesture, holographic displays erupted around the chamber. Data streams, colonization reports, technological innovations, but these weren't just reports. They were a statement. A receipt of humanity's contributions to the Galactic Concordance, trillions of credits in shared research, hundreds of planetary defense systems developed, communication, technologies that had unified species that had been in conflict for millennia, medical breakthroughs that had saved billions of alien lives, and now they would see the true cost of taking humanity for granted. Dr. Yoshida's fingers completed their neural pattern. The quantum disruption field intensified. Communication devices began to fail. Translation matrices collapsed. The sophisticated technological infrastructure that the Concordance had come to rely on, much of it human-developed, started to systematically shut down. Panic erupted. The Trilak ambassador's translation, globe exploded in a shower of sparks. The Vornak representatives found their environmental suits losing computational control. The Obsidian Collective's crystal matrices began to fracture and destabilize. "We're done talking," Reyes said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Behind the human delegation, tactical teams moved with surgical precision. Classified databases were being purged. Collaborative research was being encrypted and extracted. Years of shared intelligence were being systematically destroyed or locked away. This wasn't just a diplomatic walkout. This was a comprehensive decoupling. Commander Chen's voice, transmitted through a private quantum channel, confirmed the next phase. Extraction protocols are green. All human assets are going dark. The alien representatives were too shocked to even respond effectively. Humanity had just demonstrated that their participation in the Galactic Concordance was a choice, not an obligation. As the human delegation began to walk out, the chamber's adaptive crystals shifted to a deep blood red, a color of warning, of impending transformation. They had no idea how much was about to change. Reyes allowed himself the slightest smile. The real game was just beginning. The first signs of systematic collapse began precisely 47 minutes after the human delegation's exit from the Concordance Council. Captain Aria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TSV Prometheus, her fingers dancing, across a holographic interface that looked more like a living ecosystem of data than a traditional control panel. Around her, the Terran technological extraction fleet moved with the precision of a surgical team. Each ship a specialized instrument designed to surgically remove humanity's technological footprint from galactic infrastructure. Kalar communication. Grid going dark in 3, 2, 1, Lieutenant Zara Kim announced, her voice clinical and detached. The Kalar hegemony's entire quantum communication network, a system they had believed was their most secure asset, began to disintegrate. It wasn't a simple shutdown. It was a calculated deconstruction that left behind nothing but encrypted ghosts and inoperable fragments. Deep within the Kalar's central communication hub, technicians watched in horror as generations of technological infrastructure collapsed like a house of cards. Each system had a hidden kill switch, meticulously designed and planted during years of collaborative development. "This is impossible," screamed a Kalar communication director, his four-armed form trembling with panic. "These are our systems." But they weren't. Not anymore. The betrayal mechanism was far more intricate than a simple technological withdrawal. Humanity had spent decades weaving itself into the fabric of galactic infrastructure, not as a parasite, but as a seemingly symbiotic partner. Every collaborative project, every shared research initiative, every joint defense protocol contained layers of fail-safe mechanisms that were now activating with terrifying precision. On the mining colonies of the Vornak territories, automated extraction systems ground to a halt. The advanced terraforming technologies, originally developed through human-alien collaborative research, began to systematically deactivate. Entire planetary development projects that had taken centuries to initiate were now nothing more than inert machinery. Captain Rodriguez watched the data streams with a clinical detachment that bordered on artistry. Extraction Protocol Omega is proceeding at 92.7% efficiency, Lieutenant Kim reported. Adaptive camouflage systems are maintaining visual and quantum signatures of continued operation. What the other species didn't understand was that this wasn't destruction. This was liberation, both for humanity and for the potential of technological innovation. In the research stations orbiting the Crimson Nebula, Dr. Elena Chen monitored the global technological extraction with a strategist's precision. Each system they touched was being transformed, not destroyed. The technologies would be encrypted, archived, redesigned, prepared for a future where collaboration meant genuine mutual respect. "They thought we were just sharing," Dr. Chen muttered to herself, "when we were actually preparing." The Kalar hegemony's military command discovered the true depth of their vulnerability within hours. Their entire defensive strategy had been built around human-developed predictive algorithms and quantum communication networks. Now those same networks were systematically rendering their military capabilities obsolete. Quantum communication relays went dark. Predictive defense matrices collapsed. The Kalar found themselves exposed. Their technological superiority, which they had believed was their own, revealed as a carefully constructed illusion. But this was more than a technological betrayal. It was a statement of principles. Commander Marcus Chen, coordinating from the Terran Strategic Command, understood the psychological warfare at play. This wasn't about punishing the other species. This was about redefining the parameters of galactic cooperation. "We're not their infrastructure anymore," he transmitted on a secure quantum channel. "We're the architects of a new possibility." Each deactivated system carried with it an encrypted message, an invitation, not a threat. Collaborative technologies could be restored, but on humanity's terms. Terms that recognize genuine mutual growth over bureaucratic control. The Vornak were the first to truly understand the magnitude of what was happening. Their lead xenotechnologist, Dr. Clurin, realized that humanity hadn't just withdrawn their technologies. They had demonstrated the fundamental flaw in the existing galactic technological paradigm. Dependency was not cooperation. As the extraction protocols continued, something unexpected began to happen. Smaller species, those traditionally marginalized in the concordance, started to see opportunity in the chaos. The technological void left by humanity's withdrawal wasn't a weakness. It was a chance to reimagine technological development. Captain Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. The real transformation was just beginning. Extraction at 97.3%, Lieutenant Kim announced. Quantum encryption complete. The galaxy would never be the same. The first tremors of economic collapse began in the quantum trading floors of New Shanghai Orbital Exchange. Dr. Elena Chen watched through a holographic interface as algorithmic trading systems, her personal creation, began to systematically deconstruct the galactic economic infrastructure. It wasn't a crash. It was a controlled demolition. The Borok Trade Consortium had always believed themselves invincible. For 3 millennia, they had manipulated galactic economic systems with near-absolute precision. Their trading networks spanned thousands of star systems, controlled through complex algorithmic models that they thought were their exclusive domain. They were wrong. Every single economic model, every predictive trading algorithm, every financial infrastructure system had a hidden core, human-developed technology that had been subtly integrated over decades of collaborative development. What seemed like shared technological progress was actually a meticulously planted network of economic fail-safes. Initiating economic decoupling protocol, Dr. Chen whispered, her fingers dancing across a neural interface that looked more like a living ecosystem of data than a traditional control panel. The first wave hit the consortium's primary trading hub like a quantum tsunami. Entire financial ecosystems began to unravel, not through destruction, but through a systematic re-encryption that left behind nothing but encrypted economic ghosts. Trillions of credits worth of assets suddenly found themselves locked behind quantum barriers that would take generations to breach. On the trading floors of 100 different planetary exchanges, holographic displays erupted into chaos. The tree-like financial analysts watched in horror as their most sophisticated predictive models collapsed like a house of cards. Centuries of economic calculation reduced to meaningless data streams. "This is impossible," screamed a Borok trade director, his multilimbic form trembling with panic. "These are our systems." But they weren't. Not anymore. The economic warfare was far more intricate than a simple market manipulation. Humanity had spent decades weaving itself into the fabric of galactic economic infrastructure, not as a parasite but as a seemingly symbiotic partner. Every collaborative financial project, every shared economic research initiative contained layers of fail-safe mechanisms that were now activating with terrifying precision. Planetary economies that had believed themselves stable discovered their foundations were nothing more than an elaborate illusion. The Kalar hegemony's economic modeling systems went dark first. Their entire financial prediction infrastructure, developed through years of human-alien collaborative research, began to systematically deactivate. Entire economic development projects that had taken centuries to build were now nothing more than inert data streams. What the other species didn't understand was that this wasn't economic destruction. This was economic liberation. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, leading the Terran economic restructuring team, understood the psychological warfare at play. This wasn't about punishing the other species. This was about redefining the parameters of galactic economic cooperation. "We're not their economic infrastructure," he transmitted on a secure quantum channel. "We're the architects of a new economic possibility." Each deactivated economic system carried with it an encrypted message, an invitation, not a threat. Collaborative. Economic technologies could be restored, but on humanity's terms. terms that recognized genuine mutual growth over exploitative control. The Vornak financial analysts were the first to truly comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Their lead economic xenosociologist realized that humanity hadn't just withdrawn their economic technologies. They had demonstrated the fundamental flaw in the existing galactic economic paradigm. Dependency was not cooperation. As the economic extraction protocols continued, something unexpected began to happen. Smaller species, those traditionally marginalized, in the economic systems of the concordance, started to see opportunity in the chaos. The economic void left by humanity's withdrawal wasn't a weakness. It was a chance to reimagine economic development. The algorithms Dr. Chen had developed were more than just economic decoupling mechanisms. They were seeds of a new economic potential. Each deactivated system contained layers of encrypted data, economic models that demonstrated alternative ways of resource allocation, trade, and collaborative development. It was an economic blueprint that emphasized mutual growth over hierarchical control. Planetary exchanges that had once been rigid and controlled now found themselves with unprecedented economic flexibility. The encrypted economic models left behind by humanity were like economic DNA, capable of adapting, evolving, creating entirely new economic ecosystems. Economic extraction at 97.3%, reported Lieutenant Zara Kim from the Terran Economic Command Center. Quantum encryption complete. Dr. Chen allowed herself the slightest smile. The real economic transformation was just beginning. The galaxy's economic landscape would never be the same. The first hint of the true complexity came 3 standard galactic cycles after humanity's withdrawal from the Concordance Council. Ambassador Derek Reyes had planned this moment with the precision of a quantum chess master, and now the pieces were moving exactly as calculated. Deep within the classified archives of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, a network of relationships began to bloom like a perfectly synchronized quantum algorithm. These weren't just diplomatic connections. They were carefully cultivated ecosystems of potential and possibility. The Shintal had always been considered a footnote in galactic politics, a minor species occupying a cluster of resource-poor systems near the Orion Arm. They had been systematically ignored by the major galactic powers for millennia. No one noticed when human diplomatic teams began spending increasing amounts of time in their territories over the past decades. No one, that is, except those who were paying attention. Commander Maya Rodriguez, head of the Terran Strategic Adaptive Response Team, watched the first phase of the plan unfold through a multi-dimensional holographic interface. Each connection, each seemingly random diplomatic exchange was part of an intricate web that had been decades in the making. Shintal defense systems coming online, Lieutenant Kai Chen reported, his voice devoid of emotion. Technological signature is interesting. Interesting was an understatement. The Shintal's new defense capabilities bore an unmistakable resemblance to human technological designs. Not identical, that would be too obvious, but with the same underlying quantum architectural principles that human engineers were known. For it wasn't just technology, it was a language of possibility. In the diplomatic chambers of the former Concordance Council, panic began to spread. The alien representatives realized they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity's approach to galactic politics. This wasn't about confrontation. This was about creating an entirely new paradigm of interaction. The Trelac Diplomatic Corps was the first to truly comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Their lead xenopolitical analyst, Dr. Kiran Vor, understood that humanity had been playing a game with dimensions far beyond traditional diplomatic strategies. They weren't building alliances, Dr. Vor transmitted on a secure channel. They were cultivating entire ecosystems of potential. Each smaller species that had been marginalized by the Concordance now found itself with capabilities that defied previous understanding. The Vornak research colonies suddenly demonstrated quantum communication technologies that rivaled those of the most advanced civilizations. The scattered independent systems along the Orion Arm revealed defensive capabilities that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Ambassador Reyes's final message continued to echo through encrypted channels. Participation is a choice. Growth is mutual. What looked like chaos was actually the most sophisticated diplomatic operation in galactic history. Dr. Elena Chen, coordinating from the Terran Diplomatic Reconstruction Center, understood the psychological warfare at play. This wasn't about creating a human-led alliance. This was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to interspecies cooperation. The encrypted diplomatic networks carried more than just information. They were seeds of a new type of galactic interaction, one based on genuine mutual growth rather than hierarchical control. Lieutenant Kai Chen's voice cut through the strategic analysis. Detecting multiple emerging alliance formations. Pattern recognition algorithms suggest these are completely novel diplomatic configurations. Indeed, the diplomatic landscape was transforming. Where the old concordance had been a rigid, hierarchical structure, these new connections were more like living networks. Flexible, adaptive, responsive. The smaller species began to realize they were no longer simply pawns in a larger galactic game. They were potential architects of their own destiny. The Jintal were just the most visible example. Dozens of previously marginalized species were quietly upgrading their technological and diplomatic capabilities, not through conquest, but through collaborative potential. Diplomatic extraction protocol at 96.4%, reported Commander Rodriguez. Quantum encryption complete. What looked like a withdrawal was actually the most sophisticated expansion in galactic history. Ambassador Reyes allowed himself the slightest smile. The real diplomatic transformation was just beginning. The alien representatives who had dismissed humanity as mere mediators were about to learn a profound lesson. True power isn't about control. It's about creating possibilities. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly the point. The research stations across the galaxy didn't simply go dark. They transformed. Dr. Marcus Wong stood at the epicenter of the most comprehensive technological extraction in galactic history. Around him, the Terran Adaptive Research Division moved with the precision of quantum surgeons, systematically removing every trace of human-developed technology from collaborative research facilities. But this wasn't destruction. This was evolution. Each research station became a quantum time capsule, sealed, encrypted, containing layers of technological potential that would take generations to fully comprehend. The alien scientific community was about to learn that humanity's approach to research was fundamentally different from anything they had ever encountered. Initial extraction protocols at 73%, reported Lieutenant Zara Kim, her neural interface flickering with complex data streams. Quantum encryption matrices stabilizing. The Kalar Scientific Consortium was the first to feel the full impact. Their most advanced research facilities, built through decades of collaborative human-alien research, began to systematically deconstruct themselves, not in a chaotic explosion, but in a precise, almost surgical manner that left behind encrypted technological ghosts. Entire scientific paradigms collapsed with mathematical precision. Dr. Wong understood the psychological warfare inherent in this technological exodus. Each removed system carried with it an encrypted message, a challenge, an invitation to reimagine scientific collaboration. The technologies weren't being destroyed. They were being reset, prepared for a new kind of scientific interaction. We're not their research infrastructure, he transmitted on a secure quantum channel. We're the architects of a new scientific possibility. On the research stations orbiting the Crimson Nebula, alien scientists watched in horror and fascination as generations of collaborative research seemed to evaporate. Quantum communication networks went dark. Advanced simulation matrices collapsed. Cutting-edge research projects became nothing more than encrypted data streams. The Vornak Xenobiological Research Team discovered that their most advanced genetic manipulation technologies, developed through years of human collaboration, contained layers of adaptive encryption that rendered them temporarily inert, not destroyed, transformed. Commander Aria Rodriguez, overseeing the technological extraction from the TSV Prometheus, understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about preventing other species from accessing advanced technologies. This was about forcing a fundamental reimagining of scientific collaboration. Each removed technological system was like a seed, containing the potential for entirely new approaches to research and development. They thought we were just sharing technologies, Dr. Wong muttered to himself, watching the extraction protocols unfold, when we were actually preparing the ground for a scientific revolution. The encrypted research archives carried more than just technological data. They were comprehensive blueprints, demonstrating alternative approaches to scientific development that emphasized mutual growth over hierarchical control. Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through the strategic analysis. Detecting multiple emergent research patterns. Algorithmic models suggest these are completely novel scientific configurations. Smaller scientific teams, those traditionally marginalized in the galactic research community, began to see opportunity in the chaos. The technological void left by humanity's withdrawal wasn't a weakness. It was a chance to reimagine scientific development. The Sintal research colonies were a perfect example. Their scientific capabilities seemed to materialize out of thin air, bearing the subtle quantum fingerprints of human scientific methodologies. Not copied, evolved. Dr. Elena Chen, coordinating from the Terran Scientific Reconstruction Center, had designed these extraction protocols with a scientist's precision and a strategist's vision. Each removed system contained layers of encrypted research models, scientific DNA capable of adapting, evolving, creating entirely new research ecosystems. They never understood, Commander Rodriguez observed, that true scientific progress isn't about hoarding knowledge, it's about creating possibilities. The alien scientific community was about to learn a profound lesson. Scientific collaboration wasn't a transaction. It was an ecosystem of potential. Planetary research facilities that had once been rigid and controlled now found themselves with unprecedented scientific flexibility. The encrypted research models left behind by humanity were like technological seeds, waiting to germinate in unexpected ways. Technological extraction at 97.6%, reported Lieutenant Kim. Quantum encryption complete. Dr. Wong allowed himself the slightest smile. The real scientific transformation was just beginning. The final encrypted message embedded in the extraction protocols was both a challenge and an invitation. Scientific truth is not owned. It is discovered. Together, the galaxy's scientific landscape would never be the same. And that was exactly the point. The Concordance Council chamber became a crucible of barely contained hostility. Where diplomacy once masked centuries of underlying tensions, raw conflict now erupted with the subtlety of a quantum shockwave. The Shintal, previously considered a negligible species, sat with an unexpected calm that immediately drew suspicious glares from the larger galactic powers. Commander Maya Rodriguez watched the unfolding chaos through a quantum encrypted monitoring system, her lips curving into the slightest hint of a smile. This was precisely the scenario humanity had engineered. The Borak Trade Consortium representative, his multi-limbed form trembling with barely contained rage, launched into a tirade against the Trilac diplomatic team. Your recent technological upgrades suggest unauthorized external intervention. The accusation hung in the air like a poisoned blade. The Trilac ambassador's chromatic shifts flickered through defensive patterns. Centuries of diplomatic restraint were evaporating faster than liquid hydrogen in a solar flare. Conflict probability rising. Lieutenant Kai Chen reported from the Terran Strategic Observation Center. Current models predict a 94.3% likelihood of multi-system confrontation within the next standard galactic rotation. This wasn't an accident. This was a meticulously designed power redistribution mechanism. Dr. Elena Chen understood the deeper strategy. By removing humanity as the primary diplomatic buffer, they had forced the various galactic species to confront their long-suppressed conflicts directly. The Concordance had never resolved tensions. It had merely papered them over with bureaucratic complexity. The Vornak and Kalar, ancient rivals who had maintained a fragile peace through human mediation, now found their diplomatic firewalls systematically dismantled. Communication channels that had been carefully managed now buzzed with centuries of accumulated resentment. Quantum diplomatic encryption protocols revealing historical conflict matrices, Lieutenant Kim announced. Multiple unresolved territorial disputes dating back millennia now emerging. On the orbital platforms surrounding the Central Concordance hub, military readiness systems began to activate across multiple species. Not in a coordinated manner, but in a chaotic dance of mutual suspicion and historical grievance. The Jintal delegation remained unnervingly calm. Their technological capabilities, which seemed to have materialized from nowhere, suggested something far more complex than a simple power grab. Commander Rodriguez understood the psychological warfare at play. This wasn't about creating conflict. This was about forcing a fundamental recalibration of galactic power dynamics. "We're not destabilizing their system," she transmitted on a secure quantum channel. "We're providing them an opportunity to rebuild it." Each emerging conflict carried with it an encrypted subtext, a challenge to reimagine interspecies interaction beyond traditional hierarchical models. The power vacuum wasn't a weakness. It was a canvas of unprecedented possibility. The smaller species began to reveal capabilities that defied previous understanding. The scattered independent systems along the Orion arm demonstrated defensive technologies that seemed to materialize out of quantum uncertainty. Ambassador Derek Reyes's final message continued to echo through encrypted channels. Power is not controlled, it is negotiated. What looked like imminent galactic conflict was actually the most sophisticated diplomatic reset in recorded history. Dr. Marcus Wong, coordinating from the Terran Conflict Analysis Center, tracked the emerging power dynamics with scientific precision. The conflict matrices developing between species were not random. They were following complex evolutionary patterns that suggested a deeper, more fundamental transformation. Detecting multiple emergent diplomatic configurations, Lieutenant Chen reported. These are completely novel interaction models. The Concordance Council chamber had transformed from a diplomatic forum to a pressure cooker of accumulated tensions. The Borak representative now openly challenged the Trilak delegation's recent technological advances. The Kalar military attaché made thinly veiled territorial claims against the Vornak border colonies. But beneath the chaos, a more intricate pattern was emerging. The smaller species were no longer simply reacting. They were actively reshaping the galactic power landscape. Conflict probability models updating, Lieutenant Kim announced. Emerging cooperation vectors detected in unexpected demographic clusters. What looked like pure chaos was actually the most sophisticated power redistribution operation in galactic history. Ambassador Reyes's strategic vision was becoming clear. By removing humanity as the primary stabilizing force, they had created a system that forced genuine ground-up diplomatic evolution. Power vacuum protocols at 96.7%, reported Commander Rodriguez. Quantum diplomatic reset complete. The alien representatives who had dismissed humanity as mere mediators were about to learn a profound lesson. True stability isn't about control. It's about creating dynamic, adaptive systems of mutual interaction. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly the point. The first true collaborative network emerged in the most unexpected place, the quantum communication dead zones between the Orion and Carina arms of the galaxy. Dr. Elena Chen watched through a multi-dimensional, holographic interface as species that had never previously communicated began to form intricate diplomatic and technological partnerships. This wasn't diplomacy as the old Concordance understood it. This was something entirely new. The Shintal delegation, once considered a minor footnote in galactic politics, now moved with a calculated grace that immediately drew suspicious glances from the larger galactic powers. Their technological capabilities seemed to have materialized from quantum uncertainty, precise, adaptive, fundamentally different. Detecting emergent collaboration protocols, Lieutenant Kai Chen reported from the Terran Strategic Observation Center. Current models suggest a 78.6% probability of novel interspecies network formation. Commander Maya Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. By removing humanity as the primary diplomatic intermediary, They had created a system that forced genuine, ground-up collaborative evolution. The Trelac, traditionally isolationist, found themselves in preliminary communication with the scattered independent systems of the Vornak border colonies. Their initial exchanges carried the subtle quantum fingerprints of human diplomatic methodologies, not copied, but evolved. Dr. Marcus Wong tracked the emerging alliance matrices with scientific precision. They're not just forming diplomatic connections, he muttered to himself. They're creating entirely new models of interspecies interaction. On the research stations orbiting the Crimson Nebula, scientific teams from species that had previously been marginalized began sharing encrypted research protocols. The Borak Trade Consortium watched in mounting confusion as smaller species demonstrated technological capabilities that defied previous understanding. Ambassador Derek Reyes's final message continued to echo through quantum encrypted channels. Collaboration is not a transaction, it's an ecosystem of potential. What looked like chaos was actually the most sophisticated diplomatic reconstruction in galactic history. The Kalar Scientific Consortium discovered that their most advanced research facilities were now receiving collaborative proposals from species they had previously ignored. These weren't traditional research partnerships. They were invitations to fundamentally reimagine scientific development, quantum diplomatic encryption protocols revealing hidden collaboration vectors, Lieutenant Zara Kim announced. Multiple unexpected communication pathways emerging. The Vornak research colonies found themselves in direct communication with the scattered independent systems along the Orion arm. Their initial exchanges carried a complexity that suggested something far more profound than simple information sharing. Commander, Rodriguez understood the psychological warfare at play. This wasn't about creating new alliances. This was about forcing a fundamental recalibration of interspecies interaction. We're not building their diplomatic infrastructure, she transmitted, on a secure quantum channel. We're providing them the tools to build it themselves. Each emerging collaborative network carried with it an encrypted subtext, a challenge to reimagine cooperation beyond traditional hierarchical models. These weren't alliances. They were living, adaptive ecosystems of potential. The smaller species began to reveal capabilities that defied previous galactic understanding. Communication technologies materialized that seemed to operate on principles completely divorced from traditional quantum communication models. Dr. Chen's extraction protocols had done more than remove human technological infrastructure. They had planted seeds of possibility throughout the galactic communication networks. Detecting multiple emergent diplomatic configurations, Lieutenant Chen reported. These are completely novel interaction models. The Shintal delegation moved with a calculated precision that immediately drew attention. Their technological and diplomatic capabilities suggested they were more than just another minor species. They were architects of a new galactic paradigm. What looked like simple diplomatic exchanges carried layers of encrypted potential. Research proposals, technological collaborations, cultural exchanges. Each interaction was a quantum encrypted invitation to reimagine galactic cooperation. Collaborative network formation at 82.4%, reported Commander Rodriguez. Quantum diplomatic reset continuing. The alien representatives who had dismissed humanity as mere mediators were about to learn a profound lesson. True collaboration isn't about control. It's about creating dynamic, adaptive systems of mutual interaction. Ambassador Reyes's strategic vision was becoming clear. By removing humanity as the primary stabilizing force, they had created a system that forced genuine, ground-up diplomatic evolution. The final encrypted message embedded in the collaborative networks was both a challenge and an invitation. The future is not inherited. It is created. Together. Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through the strategic analysis with a hint of something almost like excitement. Detecting unprecedented levels of cross-species communication. Complexity models suggest we're observing the emergence of an entirely new form of galactic interaction. The galaxy was rewriting its own rules of cooperation, and that was exactly the point. The collaborative networks would continue to evolve, adapt, transform, creating possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. One standard, galactic cycle after humanity's withdrawal. The universe looked fundamentally different. Ambassador Derek Reyes stood in the Terran Collaborative Initiative Center, watching multidimensional holographic displays that mapped the extraordinary transformation unfolding across the galaxy. This wasn't just a political restructuring. This was a complete reimagining of interspecies existence. The Concordance Council Chamber, once a symbol of rigid hierarchical control, now stood as an empty monument to outdated thinking. In its place, a network of dynamic, fluid collaborative zones had emerged, each operating on principles that would have been unimaginable just a solar cycle earlier. Complexity models are off the charts, Lieutenant Kai Chen reported, his neural interface flickering with quantum-encrypted data streams. We're observing emergence of entirely novel interspecies interaction protocols. Dr. Elena Chen understood the deeper strategy. Humanity hadn't just withdrawn. They had created a massive, galaxy-wide evolutionary pressure system that was forcing unprecedented adaptation. The Shintal, previously a footnote in galactic politics, now moved with a calculated grace that commanded respect. Their technological capabilities suggested they had been preparing for this moment for far longer than anyone had realized. Quantum communication networks they developed carried the subtle, almost imperceptible quantum fingerprints of human diplomatic methodologies, not copied, but evolved. Commander Maya Rodriguez tracked the emerging power dynamics with scientific precision. The conflict matrices that had threatened total galactic war had transformed into collaborative networks of stunning complexity. Quantum diplomatic encryption protocols revealing extraordinary development vectors. Lieutenant Zara, Kim announced. Multiple species demonstrating capabilities that defy previous understanding. The Vornak research colonies now collaborated directly with the scattered independent systems along the Orion Arm. Their scientific exchanges carried a depth and nuance that suggested something far more profound than simple information sharing. These were living, adaptive ecosystems of collective potential. Dr. Marcus Wong observed the transformation with a scientist's detachment and a strategist's appreciation. They're not just sharing information, he muttered. They're creating entirely new paradigms of collective intelligence. What looked like chaos was actually the most sophisticated galactic restructuring in recorded history, the Borak Trade Consortium, once the most rigid of galactic economic powers, now found themselves participating in collaborative economic models that emphasized mutual growth over hierarchical control. Their trade networks had transformed from exploitative systems to adaptive, responsive ecosystems. Ambassador Reyes's final message continued to resonate through quantum-encrypted channels. Civilization is not a destination. It's a continuous process of mutual discovery. The smaller species that had been marginalized under the old concordance now found themselves at the forefront of technological and diplomatic innovation. Communication technologies materialized that operated on principles completely divorced from traditional quantum communication models. Detecting multiple emergent galactic configurations, Lieutenant Chen reported. These are fundamentally new models of collective existence. The encrypted extraction protocols had done more than remove human technological infrastructure. They had planted seeds of possibility throughout the galactic communication and collaborative networks. Commander Rodriguez understood the psychological warfare inherent in their strategy. We're not controlling their development, she transmitted on a secure quantum channel. We're providing them the tools to develop themselves. Each emerging collaborative network carried an encrypted subtext, a challenge to reimagine cooperation beyond traditional limitations. These weren't just alliances. They were living, adaptive ecosystems of potential that could reshape fundamental understanding of collective intelligence. The final encrypted message embedded in the collaborative networks was both a challenge and an invitation. The future is not inherited. It is created, together, always evolving. Dr. Chen's holographic displays showed something extraordinary. The various species weren't just collaborating, they were developing entirely new forms of communication technological development, and collective problem-solving that transcended individual species limitations. Collaborative network complexity increasing exponentially, Lieutenant Kim reported. We're observing the emergence of a post-species collective intelligence model. The galaxy was rewriting its own fundamental rules of existence, and that was exactly the point. Ambassador Reyes allowed himself the slightest smile. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had created the conditions for the galaxy to conquer itself, to evolve, to grow, to become something greater than the sum of its individual parts. The collaborative networks would continue to adapt, transform, create possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. Each interaction, each moment of shared discovery, was another step in an endless journey of collective potential. As the holographic displays continued to pulse with increasingly complex patterns of interaction, one thing became abundantly clear. The galaxy was no longer a collection of competing species. It was becoming a living, breathing, continuously evolving collective consciousness, and humanity had just hit the start button.